Okay, so these parts have been dry now for a couple of hours, totally dry, and so we see the pre-shading through there. Just going to give us a nice little bit of shadow going in there. Obviously it's going to be quite busy by the time we get the seats in and things like that, but the final thing I want to do is just give this a quick wipe round with the black wash. Now this is obviously my Pro Modeler's black wash. So all we do, bit on the brush, and we're just going to brush it in everywhere. And what this will do, will darken it up a bit. And there we go. Now this is going straight on top of the paint. I'm not worried about giving this a flat coat or a satin or a gloss coat on top, because we want to leave certainly quite a bit of it behind. But what we're going to do is make sure we go right to the edges around, and this will then hopefully stick quite nicely obviously to all the recesses, but also what it will do, it will just dirty everything up, give some nice shadowing effects and everything else like that. So we're just going to coat everywhere in here. Now the other way you could do this obviously is to spray it on, which is your option, which we'll just show you in a second. So that's that done with a brush on the top, which you can, but if you wanted to, if we just fire up the old compressor, what you can do, just put a bit of black wash straight into the colour cut. Let's check our flow. Okay, and literally just spray this on. But as you can see, it's spotting up a bit because obviously it's going on to quite a shiny finish. But if you keep on spraying it, you can come up with this type of effect, which obviously I'll move you in a bit closer in a moment. So if we just zoom you in a bit, you can see by spraying on like that you get quite a nice even effect. So if we just show you on this one, obviously we're on here. To start with, it bubbles up, just go back over it and it'll eat in. But it'll lay on the top of the padding, if you like, as well as sink in. So you get quite a nice effect just like that, just by giving it a quick squirt over. And then obviously in the back quite a bit, because it will just blend in hopefully with all the dry brushing work we're going to do as well. So we've done that. What we'll do, just to keep everything together, we'll just do the back as well. That's in there, and then obviously we'll just do the back of this, which will hopefully give us a little bit of shading when we come through as well. So that's done as well. So we just let those parts all dry off just for a minute. Okay, so we've done a little bit of dry brushing, just with a little bit of the X54, just to go around and bring some little bits to life, as you can see here. And what that does, it gives it a nice sort of dusty look to it, and really just sort of helps give that sort of depth. And gets away from being black, so it's going to be sort of the scrape look. Afterwards we will do a little bit more weather into it, but certainly for the minute, you know, it just helps to bring that to life. So we've done all around the backs, but we're going to go around and pick out individual colours afterwards. What we need to do to get in there at the moment is the actual the decals or decals, which are going to go on the instrument area themselves. So what we've got for that, basically, we've got the little boards here, we've got the two side ones, which are going to go each side, and then we've got the centre console, then there'll be one for the middle, but if we just get the side ones in for the moment. So usual thing with all your sort of, you know, your decaling and bits and pieces like that, you want a nice clean brush. Okay, so we'll just take a little bit of the moisture from here, brush it onto the surface it's going to go onto. Okay, then what we're going to do is pick up the actual decal itself, and we're just going to slide it in. Now people have asked why I'm not using sort of a photo etch part and bits and pieces in here, purely because you're not really going to see it. It's going to be one of those things which is going to be out of sight, so it's a lot easier sort of doing it this way. So there we go, that's that one in there just like that, and it's just going to give that sort of feeling of actually having a decal there. So if we just do the same for the other side, so we just put some water down first, give it something to stick to, pack up the actual the decal itself, and then all we're going to do is roughly place in there. Then I've got a pin just for manoeuvring it around, so then all we do is just going to pull this into position. There we go. So that's in. Sorry, just like that. So that's both of those in there now. Then what we can actually do is we'll just put the center panel in as well. Alright, that's going to sit in here, just like so. Then all we'll do, we'll get that in, just give it a bit of a push down to make sure it's in. Then obviously we've got the center one to go as well, which we've got just here. So I'll just get that one fixed in. And okay, now we've got those nicely settled in, we're going to take some Microsol, which is the red one, which is basically just a setting solution. Now on thin decals like these, sometimes they actually curl up a bit, so don't worry if it suddenly all starts to shrivel up. But what this will do is get rid of any silvering and bits and pieces around, so you just want to make sure it's all over it, absolutely everywhere. Just like that. And then what we can do, we can just let that set, give it about an hour to totally go off, and once it's gone off we should be sort of in the business and looking pretty good. So there we go, that gives our instruments all in there. So now we can get the seats fitted, go around, touch in some little colours here and there for switches, bits and pieces like that, take care of the overhead panel as well, get the seats in as you were saying, and then we can work on of doing all these lines and the bits and pieces at the front here as well, and getting them all sorted out, because some of those hoses are blue and different colours like that, so we can freehand paint those and then we can really start getting it all together. Okay, the next biggest problem is the armoured decking. So if you have a look at these pictures here, you can see that the actual panel we've got here, this flooring here, isn't exactly as it is out in operations. So we want to recreate that sort of, which looks like very thick armour on the bottom plate of the Chinook, obviously to stop enemy fire coming up through the floor. Thought about it, lots of different ways of doing it, and what I've basically come up with is to use a strip of styrene, which we've measured to the correct length and width. And then what we've actually done is I've scored into it using the P cutter, just drawn lines down to give us the grid effect as it is, as it lays down. Because then obviously what we'll do, we'll dirty it and wash it and do all the bits and pieces with the weathering. So we don't need to really cut our way in and score them and make each individual armour plate as it is in real life. We can just then lay down the entire sheet, glue this down on top, and away we go. The biggest problem to it is though, is obviously in amongst obviously all this armour plating, there's holes where it then can attach onto the base underneath for actually tying stuff down and clamping stuff down and bits and pieces like that. So we need to make those holes in there. So what I've basically done, I've made the grid effect, and by working out where the lines and the bits and pieces are and checking the reference photos, we can literally just go through. So all we're doing is at the moment is just cutting our way through with just a blade into the floor. It doesn't have to be particularly neat and tidy to do it this way, and then hopefully what we should be able to do is pick one out, and there's our little hole that goes through, and then when it all lines up with any luck, and it does, if we bring you in here, by the time I've gone around and done all the others, but it lines up, how well you can see that in there with the hole in the floor, then goes through, and then by the time we do all the others, and you'll get the grid effect, hopefully it will give us that overall impression of it. It's one of those things you're not really going to be able to see it. It's going to be one of those sort of hidden details, a bit like a lot of the cockpit work and a lot of the plumbing work that you're not going to see, because obviously by the time the fuselage halves are all over it and it's weathered in, but it's one of those nice little details that you all know it's there. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the armoured plating in. Now originally I was going to do it as one, but I found it a lot easier. Cut the main strip out, and then obviously cut the few holes in, and then just literally by nicking in, and then because obviously we'd scored it, we should just ping out the other little clamp marks. So that goes in like this. So what we'll do now, we're going to get this glued in with a bit of super glue just to tack it in place, and then but what we've got to make sure is obviously that the seat parts still fit in as well, so we're going to have to trim them slightly to get those in, but basically it's going to sit like this. These are going to go along, and then as I say, with these seat locations we'll just have to double up the holes, mark them into here, and then just take a nick out of the seat. So what we're going to do, I'll get that done now, we'll mark up these holes, and then what we can do is we can get these glued into place, sprayed, done. We can get this bulkhead then put in to the front cockpit section all weathered up and done, bits and pieces like that, and then when we're all happy with it, we can then basically start to get the interior together, bring these side walls in, which are quite heavily weathered at the moment, but it gives us our, in the right position might help, there we go, which gives us our sort of look, something like this. But once we're all in there, it should certainly bring it to life, and it really, then we can move ahead quite quickly. Okay, so there's the floor in and done, holes put in as we needed. So what I'm going to do now is something a little bit different. We're just going to put neat Tamiya XF54 into there. Nice high air pressure, as you can probably hear. And all we're going to do is spray this armour plating area nice and rough. The idea being that it'll give us a nice texture to work on, and certainly with the weathering we'll do shortly, it'll give us just a nice overall gritty type of surface to work with. So what we can do now is just do the floor area, make sure we've got the edge of this armoured surface done, pull away, and that's it, job done. So then what we can actually do is lay down some pretty heavy duty weathering on top of that, which we'll do with washes and various bits and pieces in a moment. So we just tip back our last bit in there, let that dry for a minute. Okay, so that's now dry. It's not totally dry, it's still a little bit tacky dry. It's only been dry for a couple of minutes. What we're going to do is just a drop of black wash in here. Drip it everywhere. So what we're going to do is very lightly, just going to spray this high air pressure down onto the decking. Just give it a bit of a blast everywhere, just like that. And then what we'll do is we can come round and we're going to rub some of that off anyway, but it will just help it get the weathering, the first stage of it, if you like, in there. So just give it a little drop more. That's it, happy with that. We'll let that sink in, dry off as we did the cabin ones, and then we can come back and we can dry brush it and all the rest of it. Secret here is like you might have seen me doing some of the videos that I'll come along and airbrush this dry. Thing is, when that happens, it tends to push it all in the wrong places, and we want it to build up sort of naturally everywhere. So we'll just let that pool up and do its own business. Okay, so as you can see, we've got a bit of red everywhere. What we've actually done is the cargo seats, dead simple, top, bottom half go together, sprayed red, and then all we did was pop out with a brush with a bit of silver and just did all little bits and pieces. And then next thing we got is our little brush here. We want some quite nice thick paint, and all we do is we're literally just brushing in the actual seat belts, the harness in there. So we're just going across and then up. Now you could do these with photo etch. There is photo etch sets there to do this. Or as I say, you can just literally do these. The thing is, on the inside you're not going to be able to see this very well. It will be just roughly be able to see it as you're looking up into it. So really, I don't know if it's worth forking out great amounts of money to photo etch them. The other obviously way of doing this is you can actually make them out of very thin Tamiya tape or some jammy dog tape, just like that. There we go. Let's run that one in. So there we go. So we've got it just like that. And then all we did was come along and attach them in, bit of super glue down on each one, and then just put them in there just like that. But that gives it. And then obviously what I've done here is you can see these little white holes. If you use a little Phillips head screwdriver, the round head one, and just put it over, it just tapes it away, just makes them all sit in there a lot nicer. Now obviously that's looking all a bit fresh, so what we're going to do is weather that down in a minute. We're going to get the other seats in, and then we're going to give this a bit of an airbrush around in here with some sand wash, just to give it a nice dusty, dirty look, and it'll just tone everything down nicely. So we'll get the other seats put in. Okay then, so what we're going to do is get on with some weathering. So what we've done, we've just given this top area just a quick light blow over with the sand wash. Now literally it's just straight from the bowl, straight into the airbrush. And then all we're going to do is a very light pass, because we don't want this to be a bit like we did with the black wash that you can see there. We just want it to give it an effect of dust. And obviously as this at the moment it's quite wet, and as it dries in it should give a nice sort of dusty look to things. And then what we can do, we can obviously wipe them off as you want to go. But I don't want to flood this thing inside with this. I just want it to make it look slightly dusty, and just to give it a sort of a look, if you like. And at the moment, just on air, just drying this down, just like this, and hopefully I'll zoom you in a minute and you can see what I'm trying to achieve. Just need a little bit more down the back, because obviously the back will pick more up than anywhere else. Okay, we'll just dry this down again, and hopefully I can show you now. It's a somewhat dusty look to how things are, because when this stuff first goes on, it looks quite wet, quite dark, but as it dries dusty and lighter. So what we're trying to do is just replicate some you know, sort of dust and stuff blowing up from when the actual helicopter's landing and kicking up with ground effect and bits and pieces like that. So there we go. If we just dry that down, and what you can do, a nice little technique, is just run your finger around everywhere to really bring it to life. But there we go. This is the type of effect we're going for here. As you can see, it just gives it a bit of a dusty look versus the front, just like that. And then you can see it on this area as well here around the back. And then what you can also do, if you give different drying times, so we speed this up now with a bit of air, you can actually get different patterns forming as well, and little watermarks and things going on. If we just dry off this back part, you can see what's going on. But there we go. But it just gives us a bit of a dusty look to everything and a bit more of a nice effect. It's one of those things, unfortunately, isn't picked up exactly well on camera, but certainly, let's put the compressor on, to the naked eye does look a lot better. But perhaps if I just manoeuvre this away, you can probably pick out the difference quite a lot between the two. If I show you like this, I'll take a still of this as well, that'll obviously be in the pack that comes with it, but as you can see, you get quite a nice dusty difference to it compared to the other one here, and that's the type of thing we're after. And then what you can do, you can just literally wet your finger a little bit and just pop around and clean up some bars and bits. Perhaps you can use a cotton bud here just to clean off this bit of instrument panel back there, because it probably be used quite a lot, and pick out some pipes and that, just to take some of this dusting off. And obviously it's going to stick to your cotton bud, so you can just give it some wipey marks and bits and pieces. Or that said, if you've overdone it, you can wipe it out. But there we go, just like that. So we'll get it done on the other side, and then we can crack on with the bits on the seats. Okay then, so we've got it now, and what we're going to do is just going to lay it inside the actual main area. So check your flow, literally putting a line down the middle of it, and then we're just going to pass it back across the seats, cut to air, just dry this down a little bit, and hopefully it'll give us a lovely dusty look to it all. Okay, so touch more across the seats. Okay. Quite a bit around the back, as we were saying. Just do the backs of these ones because they're going to see it in the windows as well. And all we're doing is just generally just building up dust, which hopefully will stick to literally everything. So we'll just do around the back here. Okay, and then what we're going to do is the cockpit as well, because obviously it does get everywhere, but we don't want too much going on back there. But we just need it to look like it gets dusty. And there we go, so we're just quite a bit down the floor, because we can obviously go round in a minute and wipe some of this off. Okay, so we're out of the wash there now. We're going to let this dry totally naturally, and then we can come back. Okay, so now this is totally dried. All we're doing, just lightly moistening the finger and just running it up down the seats, just so you can see the texture a bit better. And then dampish cotton bud, nothing too damp. All we do is just striking it around inside, just taking little bits of dirt. Still, things are still soft. Just starting to break it up slightly underneath, and obviously we'll fill up the cotton bud as we go, but we're just trying to make working areas, if you like. So there we go, and the same tops of the seats, just to give a little bit of wear and tear. But there we go, that gives us our very nice, very dusty cockpit sort of setup. And then obviously what will happen then, shortly what we can do is attach the inside of the fuselage halves, something like this. So basically it brings us to this sort of stage, which is quite a nice stage because it really means it's really coming together. But that detailing with the hoses around the rear, putting in the armoured plate, I think looks very nice, and various bits and pieces like that. So really what we can do now, let this totally dry. I want these seats to be nice and firm and not going anywhere, and then we can start to bring this together to get this all into position. I've still got to affix the miniguns onto this, which we'll be doing shortly, but we'll detail them later. The only little thing we've got to do in the meantime is literally, we've got these little warning areas and these signs that go along the top up here. We've got to pop them in yet as well. So we'll do those literally by hand, I think. Bit of freehand work along there to paint those in. You could use decals if you wanted to, or whichever way, just to make them a little bit more authentic and bring them together. And then obviously we can get the seats fitted into the cockpit, which is sort of looking nice and dusty in there as well. We can get them all in place, and as I say, we can get this all sealed up, and then really it starts to come together very, very fast after that. Okay, and there we have it. It's all stuck in there now. Pretty much in there, super glued down the side, bit of kicker, just hold it in place to weld it in. But there you go, I hope you can see that. It's looking pretty dusty, very nicely worn in there. Now I've still got to get the guns fitted in here before we close this all up, because in reality what happens is this top part goes on, just like that, and then obviously all that lovely detail we did in there is pretty much lost. That you're not going to see much going on in there, but you know, it's the type of thing, you know, it's in there, it's nicely done, it's nicely weathered, and if somebody is going to have a really good look at it, you know it's going to stand up and be okay. So there we go, that's those bits done just like that. So all we've got to do now, get the seats in, and basically we're all happy with that. And then what we can do, we can leave that to basically set with its top on just like that, leave it to one side, let it dry to go hard and everything, and carry on with the rest of the build. Okay, so now that's the sort of the bigger parts out the way, done and dusted, and that's the sort of complex bit. What we can really now is focus on the sort of standard build of it. The other thing I've done now is I've cut off the sprues. These are the actual rams that hold the actual the rear ramp to the fuselage that go up and down. Nice little technique. If you get them, obviously you get a centre seam running down this. Just take your blade of a knife and literally just gently, don't scrape it down, just let the blade do the work. Just rub it gently across and you'll take off the seams. And then if you come in with a sanding sponge, just a nice little one, just rotate it round, you can take them off, and that way you'll get rid of the little seam. And also you can get in some tight little areas just in here, just give it a bit of a wiggle, and that clears them out without making any damage to any detail around it. It's just a little thing to get that done. Also got the engines here. Basically this is just two halves together. You can get replacements for these as well to go right the way through, but there again you've got little joins in between, so if you just pop your knife in there, and what we'll do with these is we're going to put a little bit of mesh in there to give them more of a deeper and open look. So we'll just give them a sand with a sponge. But basically we've got them together now, so then literally what can happen is the weld action with the glue will go hard, and that means it easier for sanding. But that's, those two are done as well. So that's that out of the way. The other thing as well, for the actual main rotors on the top, usual thing is just the plate. The pin goes through with a little nut on the end, which is just glued in, and they do rotate. That way I've done them so they can rotate. It's a for and against thing really. At the end of the day, if you're going to have it on a display, perhaps you don't want them rotating around and all the rest of it, but on the other hand, if you do give it a knock and they do move slightly, it's better than the entire thing shifting and flying off your table. So it's just a bit of personal choice. Sometimes it's better to glue them hard in place and you don't have them sort of sitting slightly to one side and various bits and pieces like that, but it's a personal choice with that. These front parts would go on the engine normally in something like this as they connect to the actual, to the right one might be handy. There we go, there is a left and a right to them, but what these will actually do is they will go on just in here like this, and this is the actual shaft that then runs to the actual engine itself and goes through. But on this one we're going to do slightly different. We're going to put some sand filters on here, so those will be covered up. We still need them to make the line to come across, but we're probably going to have to cut them up anyway. But for the moment we're just going to do it as is the kit, and then we can change it over so you can see both ways of doing it. So that's that. Wheels, same thing, literally just two halves together. I want to go here, and then drop of extra thin. If you just put it in one spot and then twist it, it will go all the way around then without getting gluey marks everywhere. Then again, let them dry totally, and then you can just come along lightly with a sanding stick to start with, just to get rid of the seam in the middle. just like that, and then you can pop in with your sponge just to round them off. And then what we're going to do, we'll cause some little flat spots on them, but then we need it to know how it's going to sit before we attempt with that. At the back, I've got the rear ramp which we put together, pretty straightforward. It's just two halves, and then these parts here, which is the actual way it's going to clamp to the underside on the back. You've got the little area at the back, which is where the other one slides up and comes up and all the rest of it. But there again, it's just one of those quite straightforward things that we can do just like that. But there are a few little pieces to get done and sort of out of the way so they can start drying and setting up. These here are the exhausts for the engines. They're a bit flashy. As in, what I mean by flashy, it means they've got little bits of plastic all over them and all the rest of it. Need to be cleaned up a little bit. And what we're going to do, we'll obviously give them some nice burnt metal colours, because they've got a lovely colour when you look at them in real life. They've got a sort of brassy copper look into them, obviously where the heat gets to them. But as I say, they are a little bit flashy, so you can either do it with a sanding stick or a sanding sponge like this, just to clean up those parts. Okay, so the last couple of bits we can do, sort of sub-assemblies, is to do the actual rescue hoist. So literally get it the right way around. That's it, those two halves can go together and go on. This is another one. What we'll do, we'll let the weld action take care of this, so it will totally dry, then we'll come back and clean it up and sand it up and everything, because it's a nice drum. And this is an area where we're going to detail as well, because this one on the modern RAF Chinooks goes above, which is sort of standard to other countries, but the early ones with the RAF ones didn't have them. But it basically goes on the top here. But I've got some nice close-up shots which we'll do later, which actually shows the hydraulic lines going in and various bits and pieces. So we'll get that sorted out. So the last thing we can do, we've got here, and this is just the hydraulic cooler, which goes at the top, which RAF versions, the early ones, have them covered up. The latter has them open. The kit itself, you can have the doors open to look at this piece of equipment, or have it closed, so it's personal choice if you want it opened or closed. I'm going to have it closed up so you can just see the front of this piece of kit, but basically it's all painted black. So that goes on, whoops, and then doesn't want to go today. Literally, it's just going to sit in the front just like this, and then obviously the housing comes around it and closes it all up. But there we go. So that's the assemblies. We can let them dry, sand them off, get them ready, and then what we can actually do then is get this all brought together, which is quite a feat in itself to get all these parts in. And this is where we've had to be careful with this detailing. You can see it here. It has to be very flat so these sidewalls fit amongst it. There we go. This one then, hopefully, all going well, will allow us to seal this up. And then obviously underneath here we'll have a belly plate which fits in, which we'll have to do a little bit of work with, but when we bring all this together and bring it all in, we should be fine.